uh, before we get started, guys, just like you can mute yourself. When you want to ask any question, you can just unmute yourself and ask our speakers directly. And whoever following us on YouTube, you can leave the comment there and we will ask directly our speakers. And today we have Steve. He's will give like some cool talk. If you look at his background, he will address some security using DevOps and automations. And we have Donnie. I think most of you knows Donnie. He's not here yet. He will join in a few minutes. And basically, Donnie is one of our biggest supporter for our user group here. He's been supporting us for the past 5 years, and he will talk about 12-factor app with AWS serverless services. Again, like just I mentioned before, just mute yourself, unmute yourself, and ask our speakers directly. And if you can open your cam, that would be awesome, so we can have the real on-site experience. For the first talk, we will start with Steve. So I will pass it to you, Steve, from here.
Hello. You know, the only thing we didn't try is screen share, but let me see if I can. It should be fine. I mean, it did pass the test script, so hang on. Why is there no box?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, there it is. Okay, it's coming. It's coming. Hey, there we go. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can too. Amazing. Right,
Awesome.
we're underway. Thank you. Really amazing to be presenting tonight, and thank you everyone for joining. I'll get into my background and my name in a moment. Just wanted to say I hope everyone's keeping safe and well and keeping occupied. Like, it's always important to keep yourself busy, learning new things. I always love learning new things, especially, well, not only just in current times, but hopefully we get to meet all IRL again soon. I've spoken at a number of events throughout the region. I've got a whole slide on this, but in particular, I have been to Malaysia a couple times now, and I just going to say right now, I'm missing the kopi. I love kopi. I love all things sugary, and kopi especially. So anyway, hopefully we all get to see each other again soon. Just going to switch over to my presentation. So tonight, or today, this afternoon, I want to share some of the stuff I've been playing with in AWS code pipelines, in particular around the security side of things, but we will get into that as we go through. I do have a disclaimer. Now, for those that I haven't met before, I'll do my, that was a spoiler. I do have a very long list of developer jokes, and these are open source jokes. Actually, I have a couple of those as well, but they're all open source. So feel free to just reshare them, because again, like, we need to keep smiling, we need to keep laughing. So yeah, feel free to take this one with you. But my joke I'm going to open with tonight is, why did the vulnerability get tired? You might be like, why would a vulnerability get tired? It's because it ransomware. Get it? Get it? I can feel the face palms already. If you have any questions, emojis or whatever, just pop them in the chat, or tell me how bad my jokes are at the end. Or if you've got any questions, drop in as well. But hello, for those that I haven't met yet, my name is DeveloperSteve, actually legally. So I've been a developer evangelist or a developer advocate for a number of years now. I'm currently senior developer advocate at a company called Sneak. So we do a whole bunch of security stuff. But yeah, I've been a developer advocate for a number of years. So I've been able to, as an advocate evangelist, I get to come out and talk to, connect with just folks from all over the place, whole bunches of community groups, lots of conferences, lots of blog posts, videos, etc. And like, I've been doing it since 2014. After a while, people just started calling me DeveloperSteve. So I thought, when I got married a few years ago, and that's on the top right, that's my wedding photo. Actually, the top of that wedding cake, I 3D printed the night before my wedding. What can go wrong? I like to live dangerously sometimes with demos. But yeah, when we got married, we combined our last names. So Cooper plus Houchin became Kuchin, which is my married name, my new family married name. And when I got my name legally changed, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to make DeveloperSteve my middle name. So turns out you can do that. So there we go. Yeah, bit of a story there. But so, and I've been coding for so many years now, like literally since the age of 8. So And back then, for those that might remember it, if you do like pop it in the chat, I'm always surprised how many people remember this particular coding language. But I was writing in QBasic when I at the age of 8, which, well, as the name suggests, is a pretty basic language. Like there was no libraries, there's no dependencies. Like you were literally rebuilding everything over and over again. Actually, I remember buying a whole bunch of programming books at the time and coding away on my Atari 800 XL. That was with the big 5.5-inch floppies many moons ago. But of course, things kind of have moved along a lot since then. That was many moons ago. I'm showing my age. I see. I should, or I could almost say just in that bit, like back in my day, but that'll just make me feel really old. But things have moved along quite a bit since then, and now, of course, as you know, for those that are familiar with coding languages and development, you can take some open source libraries now and import them really easily to build out applications. So if you think all those times, you don't even think about it now as a dev. It's just like npm install, composer install, like Ruby gems. You can just install whatever you need. And then any subsequent dependencies for that particular library to do the things it does gets pulled in. And on the code front side, like you can write literally like on the screen, you could literally just write a couple lines of code. You don't even think about what's sitting behind it. But something sort of going through my developer origin story, because I moved through digital agency. I spent 10 years as an analyst, like even as a CTO. There was a lot of platforms and applications that I built and deployed or helped build and deploy as part of a team where I often wondered, like, what is this doing to the infrastructure that I'm deploying this stuff on? When you think about it, like as devs, we're building out these applications for users to do all the things that we want them to do with our apps, be it building out entertainment apps or social connectivity apps. Like we're building out these experiences for users to affect their day-to-day lives in so many different ways. But underlying to that, there's like a holistic stack that you're literally exposing to the internet, because like as devs, we build the top of that iceberg. So if you think of that code that you're writing, those few lines, and then all that open source dependencies underneath it, it's literally just the tip of the iceberg when you think of it in a holistic stack point of view. And as we know, like open source communities are great. They're exponentially growing year on year, particularly as functionality grows out, not only in languages, but the underlying infrastructure as well. Because you've got sometimes like an open source community or an open source function as part of a library that will split out into smaller dependencies that then get used by other components in other ecosystems or in that ecosystem. So one library can start out as one holistic, like really big set of functions that then builds out into smaller ones because, well, that particular function or that particular group of functions can be used by these other libraries, and that saves time, etc. So we get this exponential growth across ecosystems year on year. And with that, the number of vulnerabilities we're discovering sort of grows as well, particularly when you're looking at from the security side of things, which there's always new attack vectors, always new attack methods for getting into apps or getting into parts of the iceberg, part of your stack. Year on year is exponentially growing as these open source dependency ecosystems are growing. In fact, we find that 80% of vulnerabilities discovered in applications, in infrastructure, is coming from indirect dependencies more than direct dependencies. So when you think about that, like as a dev, I call in one particular package from an ecosystem to build out like an authentication piece or some sort of functionality inside the application. That's not necessarily where the direct problem is or the direct vulnerability is going to be surfacing, but it's the indirect dependencies that are causing part of the problem. And sometimes it can be a combination of a multitude of indirect dependencies, or even a certain dependency and then the infrastructure it's running on, which is causing these attack vectors to appear in the top of the stack. I'm just going to pause there. And I know you all know this, but I love mentioning it. I'm a big fan of open source. But if you are using a particular component or the particular open source library dependency, or just like love a community that's doing amazing things, always remember to give back where you can. just even just updating a README or contributing back to that code base, even just in small ways, helps the overall community do the amazing things that they do. And plus, we're all like, well, we're all the product of an open source ecosystem anyway. But I know you all do. You're all amazing. I just like mentioning it. In particular, one of the reasons why I'm mentioning that is a lot of the times vulnerabilities are found and identified back into open source libraries and communities or projects or whatever else. And it takes a little bit of time for that community, because most of them are all volunteers as well. But it takes time for that bug to be identified, time for a fix to go into place, time for a fix to be tested, and then rolled out into the production version of that particular community. So if you've got some time, I know they'd very much appreciate it. And one thing I always love mentioning on this too is, if you're a developer just starting out, or a DevOps person just starting out, this is a great way to get involved and show what you can do. I always put these type of involvements on my resume. So anyway, there we go. Not going to go on about that anymore. I know you all do. So I just wanted to mention. So one of the ways that we give back, Sneak gives back to a lot of the different community, or a lot of the different open source projects, is with a program called Sneak Advisor. So what that does is actually does a few things. From the community side of things, we're able to help that group monitor and track the security behind some of their code, some of their dependencies, etc. We are able to also surface a holistic view, a historical view of issues that particular package has had over a period of time, different versions where vulnerabilities have been detected, how fast they're able to turn that around. And quite often we're actually able to help them with fixes going into place a lot faster. So being able to identify the attack vector that's appeared in their particular library or their particular community piece, we can help them turn that around a lot faster. From the development and infrastructure side of things as well, this is a great way for developers, for infrastructure people, to be able to identify and do some due diligence on the components they're using as well. So if you are looking for get involved in community, it's a great way to do it. We also help with the Node.js ecosystem vulnerability disclosure program. So with and if there's any security folks joining us, thank you for the work you do. Yeah, this is one of the ways that we give back in helping identify issues and help get them fixed, because ultimately, like, keeping all these packages that are commonly used to be ongoingly scanning, not only initially, or knowing what packages that you're actually using in your application development or even your stack development, but also continually scanning that particular infrastructure, that particular code set, to make sure you're not letting anything in, because ultimately, again, that's what it's about: protecting the users, protecting your infrastructure. I mean, so many times when I was going through digital agency world, and I'm not going to mention WordPress, but I'm probably going to mention WordPress. I'm amongst friends, it's fine. The amount of times that I was deploying, a single site app or some type of campaign site, not even just on WordPress. I love WordPress. But yeah, no matter what I was deploying, sometimes you get that site come back in, or that client project come back in, because there's all sorts of nasty pop-ups on there, or you have that infrastructure person come up and go, hey, why is the server usage gone through the roof? Which brings me to my next point, which is, and sort of getting closer to that, particularly to that AWS stack, is in a cloud native world, your app is way more than your code, and it literally just becomes part of your holistic stack. And for me, moving from developer to DevOps through my developer origin story, DevOps was a way for me to build my own sandboxes. It was great. You can literally define your own environments. How cool is that? And of course, that's gotten even easier with IAC now too. But anyway, we're going to get into that. Spoilers. I love jumping ahead of myself. If you think containerization using something like Docker, for example, Docker is so widely adopted now, like 242 billion downloads to date from their stats from Docker Inc. Those are base image downloads to date. that's just sort of speaking volumes into how much people are adopting the whole digital transformation piece, which is going on, well, not even going on at the moment, just that has been emerging over the years. From a infrastructure point of view, like being able to deploy my app and make it containerized means that I can move it across clouds. I could move it around a particular cloud a lot faster, a lot easier. It's just making my app become more portable, but also scalable across environment, which is really cool. Of course, as you can imagine, a lot of these containers are built on those same open source vulnerabilities that we've just been talking about too. So what we see consistently is the top 10 Docker base images on Docker Hub carry a lot of security vulnerabilities with them. So it's one thing to keep your code nice and safe and can make sure it's all clean before you deploy it, but it's a whole other thing to then deploy that clean code into a vulnerable environment, because you're still opening yourself up to those attack vectors that we've been talking about. Now, the way that I like to think about this is, with great containerization comes great responsibility. I do love that meme, just saying. But yeah, so having that view of, just cleaning the code that one time, or even ongoingly scanning your base code that's being deployed for your application is one thing, but then knowing that it's going onto clean infrastructure is a whole other thing in itself that you need to be mindful of. Which is why you need to be continually scanning your base Docker images as well. Ideally, what you do is you start with a minimal image, so just a base image, like a Node.js image, just running the version of Node that you know is A, safe, or B, that will run your app, of course, and then adding the components in that you need as part of the image deployment. And then keeping that nice and safe and continually scanned inside your container registries, which AWS has some great services for this too. So, and this sort of brings me to my third point, and then we're going to have a look at some code. I have 2 demos, and they're totally going to work. Yes, they are. I'm convincing myself as much as Murphy's Law. But AWS CloudFormation, code pipeline, and one of my favorites, S3. Now, I'm just going to pause there because, well, I probably don't need to tell everyone because you all know this, but I'm just going to remind you all, please make sure you have your permissions set right in S3. It is totally worth checking on that Friday that you're not deploying any code, because we never do deployments on a Friday, right? Right. I should switch to my "this is fine" scene. But these sort of infrastructure as code components are really cool, because as a developer, like, I can deploy my stuff really, really fast. As a security person or a DevOps person or a sec DevOps person, it means that I can set some nice gate controls in place. And that's one of the things we're going to be looking at today, so that developers can deploy what they need as part of like an infrastructure deployment, but I can have test scripts and all sorts of nice gate stops in place, just in case something doesn't pass, it won't get deployed. And I love automation. I'm not a lazy dev. I just love automation, because when it works well, it works well. And again, you don't do that on a Friday though. We all know that. So I'm not going to keep going on about that. Oh, I just talked about that, so we're not going to go into that one. One thing to note here before we get into the demo is, according to the NSA, actually there's a whole bunch of different agencies around the world that are now also saying this as well, which is the #1 cloud vulnerability is misconfiguration. So again, and sort of going back to my suggestion comments, my well wishes about S3, is just make sure you've got those configurations set right. Something to do on that Friday that you're not deploying anything is maybe occasionally just review. You should always be reviewing those just to make sure everything is cool. And even having a second set of eyes within the companies, within the app deployment teams that you're working with, making sure, like, get a second set of eyes on there. Have some copy and have a look over it together. Not going to go into that one because I kind of just covered it. Anyway, spoilers. Let's do the app thing. Who wants the let's do some code. All right. Let me just switch back to see if there's any comments. Oh, there's some chat things going on. Middle introduction. Yay, Donnie, you remembers QBasic. I love that. All right, cool. I'm going to switch back to my other window and let's go do some app things. So the first, I have 2 demos. I might have 3. So here we go. So the first demo, I'm going to be showing you quickly what I've been talking about with vulnerable libraries. So for this, this is one of my favorite apps, and I'm going to show you why. I mean, I do a whole bunch of fun demos, but I love this one because, well, it has this little badge on it, which I know there's 57 vulnerabilities in there. So anyway, which is an important point because this is for demo purposes only, and something you can try at home, but this is not for production. All right, please don't deploy this to production, but I know you won't. I just love pointing out the 57 vulnerabilities that I know are there and are intentional, which is great because, I mean, how often does that happen? Anyway, this app is a basic to-do app, which we use for demoing the type of vulnerabilities and libraries that I've been talking about. So the one in particular we're looking at today is a marked package. It does markdown as part of user input in a to-do application. So you can enter some basic input in there or enter some basic markdown in there. Wait, not Q basic, just simple. The version in particular we're going to be using is 0.3.5. Anything below 0.3.6 is not good. Well, and greater than 3.1. But anyway, you get the idea. One of the things as a dev that I kind of really love looking at is the actual CVEs behind security alerts behind a particular vulnerability. For me, it's more about understanding how it works, what it's actually doing, how the vulnerability, well, at the code level, how the vulnerability gets around the code. And so for the marked library, there's some basic regex inside there. Where is it? There it is. Some basic regex and syntax matching that tries to pick up user input and then strip it out of the input, strip it out of the user-based input. And as devs, always should be sanitizing inputs, but you all know that. I'm just reminding you. So let's have a look at this vulnerability. It's markdown, so I can do this is might be a pun coming. Bold statement. See what I did there? See what I did there? And it makes it bold. Basic markdown. Of course, all the things you can do with markdown as well is you can set up a link. So you can do something like that, for example, where you can just put a regular link in, and that works because, well, I know as a user, I know where I'm actually going. One of the attack vectors that OWASP, the global security group, talk about is being able to input JavaScript that can inject into the user's browser. So, and I've actually done this when I've previously done a bit of pen testing as well over the years. I've totally dabbled. Is as part of a link input, you can inject some JavaScript into the actual link, input, so that you can try and do some malicious things in the user's browser. Now, quite often, if I'm dealing with the user's browser just through base input, what I'm trying to do as an attacker is steal things like cookies or some type of keylogger to try and get some user information out. So there's a few nasty ways that this particular one can be used. So if I try something like that, for example, just using a JavaScript alert, as you can see, that doesn't work because the sanitized part of this particular this particular library is able to identify the nasty bits and just doesn't really let it go anywhere. One of the common ways to get around this, though, is to URL encode the character sets. So again, we're trying to trip up the library and work out like a way to get around it. So URL encoding the input might be a way to sort of get around some of the regex because it's just regex. So it's only as smart as the code that it's been told to look for. So, and that totally doesn't work, as you can just see. Of course, what we're trying to do is do an executable. So again, I'm doing URL encoding here, but I'm using a JavaScript this to try and trigger a different character matching so that I get around the sanitize function on that library, which is the thing that actually works. That's the vulnerability in this particular library. So you can see there, it looks like a link. As a user, I won't suspect anything unless I hover over it. Most users don't do that. But ideally, like this could be used a few different ways. And I've done something similar when I was pen testing, whereas it was able to inject the JavaScript executable like that, except I was redirecting the user's browser to a particular website, actually to my website for a few hours, was to prove a point. Grey hat hacker. But see, with this particular link here, if I click that, and you might have guessed that is another pun, but it says this box is alerting, and it's a JavaScript alert box. Hey, we're going to come back to that library in a moment, because now I'm going to switch over to one of our favorites, AWS. Our only favorite, I should say. And in particular, what this talk is about is looking at code pipelines, which I absolutely love, like as a dev, because again, like I can set up automation. Automation's great. I love automation. So what we're going to do is I've actually got the Node.js. Let me make that a bit bigger. There we go. I've got the Node.js code sample for EKS, and I love EKS. It's so elastic. It's so fast. It's so cool. I'm using, I should get rid of that git ignore though. I can hear you all thinking it. I'm thinking it, sorry, I know you are. Anyway, I've got the AKS Node.js application here, which is straight from the AWS documentation. There's nothing fancy about it. It is literally just straight from the AWS documentation. We're going to do a couple of things with it. So first thing we're going to do is let's set up a code pipeline. And of course, I tested this before we got in here. Pretty sure it should work. What can go wrong? It's not Friday yet. So I'm going to set up a pipeline. Wow, what am I calling it? Test pipeline. Let's call it that. Pipeline. I should come up with a funky name for that. I've already got some of this configured just to sort of speed things up a bit, because you know that moment where you got to wait for the infrastructure to deploy? Yeah, it takes a couple seconds. See, so impatient as users now. It's like this used to take months to set up. Now it takes like, well, a minute or so, but still, like as a user, I want it now. Anyway, okay. Oh, that was, should have seen that one coming. Let's put an underscore in there. Yeah, okay, I like that. So source provider that we're pulling in from is of course GitHub, and we're going to use version 2 because, well, version 1's stuff should be moving to version 2 in code pipeline world. I've already got a connection set up just to speed things up a bit. So it's probably going to pull in my long list of repositories. How quickly do repositories build up? You start off with one, next minute you end up with like many. So I'm going to pull in my AWS code pipeline sample from there. I've only got one branch that I'm interested in at this stage, so I'm going to select that one. I'm just going to use code pipeline default because, yeah, it works good. And go over here. So choose the build provider. AWS code build works cool, works great. Project name, I'm going to use one from before, just called test app. And click next. Deploy provider, I'm going to choose Elastic Beanstalk. Yeah, that was the one I choose. Application name, I've already got an EB instance configured for this environment. Again, you kind of don't do that on this screen, so I've used one I prepared earlier. But you're all familiar with EB, so I trust you are. If not, totally worth checking out. Some great tutorials on that. Anyway, that's kind of it. How easy was that? Anyway, what this is going to do is set up a nice, simple pipeline to pull in from my GitHub repository and load it through some basic checks and then deploy it onto Elastic Beanstalk. Pretty easy. And that's when everything went wrong. No. All right, so I'm going to let that build for a second because it's just going to grab it from source. It's going to do the builds, which will probably take a little bit of seconds. I'll let it go to build and then I might stop it and edit this a little bit. And that's going to do some thinking. See, this is when last time I did this demo, I actually went and edited my GitHub, which triggered a whole other build while another build was happening. That's when things went wrong. I'm not going to do that this time around. Anyway, that build shouldn't actually take too much time. Actually, while that's doing that, I'm going to switch back to the chat and see if anyone's live demos organized. Oh, so many times. See, I did this last week somewhere else, and yeah, 2 of my things failed. This is why I do 4 demos, because at least 1 or 2 of them are going to work. No, it should be fine. I was going to shut that down, but I have a feeling that's going to finish any second now. That's when the red cross appears. No, it should be fine. It's pretty basic. All right, while that's running, oh, I thought it was going to go green then. See, hey, excitement. So that deploy should be almost done any second now, right? It only just started, but it should almost be done. Hang on, let's open that up and get ready to get the application, because any second now. Did that finish? Oh, okay. I was thinking, wow, it's finished by the time I've opened another chat window, another browser window. That was quick. And so I'm gonna do something once this is deployed, which should be any second now. Oh, there we go. All right, so if I open up that now, what that's done is deployed the application. Hurrah! Yeah, so that's deploying an application with code pipeline, but we haven't made this secure yet. So what I'm going to do now that that's actually finished, I'm going to do a couple of things. And this time while it's running, I'm going to go show you something. So what we're going to do is, remember when I was saying you can add stages or gates as part of your pipeline build, which is cool because you can put, as a DevOps or Sec DevOps, you can put some nice gate controls in there so that code can be tested, and not only for code quality or code runtime, but also security tested at the same time. So after the source code stage, what I'm going to do is add a stage called security. I actually found something in this that I'm going to show you that I thought was interesting. So action name, I'll just call it security scan. There we go. Action provider, I'm going to hook sneak scan up to that. Now there's normally a bit of a bug, not a feature, that appears, wait, other way around, feature, not a bug. So when I connect my account, which I didn't refresh before I keyboard here, should be fine. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to authorize that to access my GitHub, which then does the whole redirect thing. It's probably going to bounce around a few more times, passing token around. Come on. Using my dev powers here. All right, I'm feeling, oh, no, I didn't have to click it. Oh, well, there you go. They did an upgrade. Nice. So I'm just going to authorize, what that just did was hook up the vendor. That wasn't a 502 you just saw, that was a feature. Then hit confirm. So, and there we go there. That's now hooked up. So what I've now just done is created a gate step so that a security scan will run as part of that flow. And it's going to check for a few different things that we'll look at in a sec while that's rerunning. Report as an output artifact. There we go there. So that's now done it. Going to save that new flow. So it's going to check for a few things as part of that release. But what we're going to do before we do the release, we're going to put a known vulnerability just for fun into, and again, this isn't, well, it's kind of going to production, but it's for test production. That's a different level of production. Yeah, let's go with that. So what I'm going to do is, because it'll re-trigger another build to happen, we're going to add a dependency that we know has a vulnerability in it. In particular, we're going to add marked 0.3.5 in, just for fun. And we'll grab that one, put that in there. I could also do this CLI, which, yeah, I'm kind of here. Also, my computer's a bit laggy. All right, cool. So I've just saved a known vulnerable dependency into my package.json back in my Node.js app, which should have then also triggered, I should probably have released that. What can go wrong? Like to live dangerously sometimes. That's probably going to do too. All right, what's that? 5.2D1. All right, I'm going to stop execution on 5.2D1. There we go there. And then just let the first one run. Hey, there we go. So that should have confused it. Yes, we intentionally confused it. It stopped one thing. I'm just going to release that again, because what can go wrong? Okay, cool. All right, so it's going to grab the source, and then I'll let it go to security, but then I'll switch over just in the interest of time. I just want to see that I actually, oh yeah, it should be fine. This is fine. Anyway, you get the idea. Yeah, there we go. Come on, you can do it. Is it gonna do? I think I've broken it. Wasn't that fun? It seems to be stuck. No, it seems to be stuck in an inbound execution ID. Oh, there we go. Just cleared itself. Wasn't that great? That was unexpected. Let's call that a feature. Anyway, while that security scan's running, what I'm going to do is switch over because that should have picked up in my projects now. So if I refresh this, it should have picked up that change that I've just made, and you'll be able to see two things that I want to show you as part of this. There it is there. So as you can see here, it's actually picked up two different things. So it's picked up the package.json changed, and you can see like it's just picked that up a few seconds ago. But 2 minutes ago, it actually picked up a problem with the code, which kind of surprised me when I found this because I wasn't expecting to find this. So inside the code sample from AWS documentation, it actually uses in JavaScript and Node.js. It's actually using an insecure transport method. And back on the application, it actually does. It just has HTTP, does not using HTTPS, which we actually identify as a security issue because, well, we should be using HTTPS. Anyway, I was kind of surprised at that one. But the other thing to note too is that in vulnerable dependency that we've just picked up automatically showed up in the package.json manifest. So you can see here the mark library 0.3.5, exploit maturity, et cetera, et cetera. It talks you through all the different things that are wrong with it and why it's bad, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, just going to show you one. Nah, let's switch back and go to Prezzo. I can show you all later. Oh yeah, and also GitHub picked it up as well. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, that was the demo side, and it kind of worked. Actually, it worked with a couple of unexpected features, which is pretty cool. I just saw a couple of questions in there, so I'm just gonna wrap up these last few slides. Had like two more things that I was gonna share, and then I'll switch back and answer questions. And also, yay, it worked. I should have a yay it worked GIF on here, but yeah, yay, it worked. Anyway, we've got a really good write-up on this. Plus, yeah, we've got a really good write-up on this if you want to read more. We also have because we're an AWS partner, in the AWS documentation, there's some code examples and also how to set up integration side of things. I love the AWS docs. It's so easy to learn from. Anyway, one thing I didn't talk about tonight that I'm really surprised at lately, this is kind of AWS related, but for those developers that are using VS Code, I've got some bad news. This is something actually starting to do some demos on at a couple things around region. This not only surprised me, but setting it up as a demo really scared me to the point where I decided to set up OS X inside a VM just because I didn't want this in my development environment. Essentially, what we found is extensions inside VS Code, because a lot of them are built on the open source stuff we've just been looking at, actually carry a lot of the vulnerabilities with them into VS Code. So one of the demos we've actually been doing allows an attacker to access through your development environment through a particular, well, a few different extensions, can actually lift your password file from your Mac out. My manager actually did this by accident on a live stream, and his password file was exposed to the world, which was an interesting Slack message to wake up to one time. Anyway, I just please make sure what we've been talking about today with some of the vulnerabilities and doing the due diligence, knowing what you're installing. Please make sure you know what you're installing in your development environments, because we're seeing these vulnerabilities now surface there as well, which even in Brew, but that's a whole other, for those that are familiar with the Brew ecosystem on Mac, but that's a whole other talk in itself. So anyway, just please be careful. Just some final takeaways. I put this under the heading of always be scanning source code, containers, infrastructure. See, I should have put developer tools in there as well. That's a whole other thing. I have to edit that one later. Just finally, the SneakCon, actually the call for papers is closed now, but this SneakCon 2021 is coming up. It's free to attend. It's region friendly. So if you're looking to learn more security side of things, check that out. Also, the DevSecOps Leadership Awards for DevSecCon is open at the moment. So if you know somebody, an individual, a community, a team that's doing some amazing things in the DevSecOps space, nominations are open now. So have a look at that as well. Just lastly, please use your tech superpowers for good. I know you will do anyway. And always remember to be excellent to each other. Because, well, in open source communities, that's what we do. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm going to switch back and check the chat now. Oops, spoilers. Or you put an alert one. Hang on, I'm reading backwards. I remember, okay, I got up to that. Live demo always goes well. Your security scans is scanned against what baseline or be configured. And NIST says, so it's a combination of NIST. It's actually a combination of all three of those things. So we do use the a lot of the CVEE scoring methods. Do you also put code from being deployed to production? Yes. So you can put the user has or the configurating user has control over what gets deployed, what doesn't get deployed, what scoring can be put against it before it does go deployment. Also, you have automatic PRs that can go in to automatically put a PR, stop the deployment, put a PR in back on the actual repo, and then that can be reviewed and redeployed and goes through the same cycle. So yes, big fan of automation, in particular putting gates, manual gates in there so that somebody can do the due diligence, recheck things, have a look through it to make sure it all is good to be deployed on any other day but a Friday. Saturday it's fine. No, not Saturday either. Yes.
Great. That was a really fun presentation, Steve, and I'm really happy that we recorded so we can share it later for the community as well. We still have some time for a few other questions, guys. So if you have any question, just unmute yourself and ask Steve directly.
Wait, do you want me to tell another joke?
Yeah.
If no one asks any questions, I've got more jokes.
Okay, cool. You still can ask Steve questions. I think you can reach to him on Twitter, LinkedIn, and I think he will be happy to answer you. Correct, Steve?
Yeah, would love to connect. Yeah, just reach out, say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve, and hopefully we will get you again in our community face to face at some point.
Hopefully soon.
Okay, let me just share my screen before we go to Donnie. So actually today we have some hiring announcement, and I see Hassan and Ken. They both are here. They've been hiring for a lot of developers and solutions architects. So Ken and Hassan, if you want, just like maybe explain quickly on what do you guys do and what you are guys looking for, as well. Like this is the point of our community as well, to share if you want to switch your career or change your job. This is your opportunity. So Ken and Hassan, if you guys want to share something.
Hi. Maybe I will share first. Hi everyone. So this is Ken. So I'm in a company called Encode. So just a bit of trivial is that I come from Hong Kong, and I think I met Donnie in the Singapore user group or something, and someone also I met Donnie in the Philippines as well. So I travel around in the different countries in ASEAN, and right now I'm trying to get a team of developers to get on board to the AWS communities, especially if you're interested into AWS but didn't have the opportunity to experience yourself or to explore more in terms of actually getting some projects or product to work on. I'm very open to get people on board to the AWS community, and hope to give you guys the opportunity to work as a developer using AWS services, and also hopefully you learn something along the way. Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether you're just starting off learning about AWS or you just joined today. If you are interested, you are passionate about it, feel free to apply, and we will see you in the interview, and hopefully can give you a give you a good career path for you to come. Yeah.
Awesome. Just tell them that you are coming from the user group and you will skip the interview. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, awesome, awesome. And I will share this opening, guys, with you on Facebook if you want to apply later as well. Great. So if you want to do something similar, like hiring announcement, like what Ken just did, just scan this QR code or let me know on LinkedIn that you guys are hiring, and we can give the announcement in our next meetup in August. One more thing, if you want to speak at our user group, again, scan this QR code, and you can find this form or QR code in our Facebook group. You can talk about anything AWS related. If you are doing a side project, if you are doing some cool project with your team, just come and share it with the community. And it can be any level. It shouldn't be like only advanced level or mid level. We love like all levels, as you know, like all our people who are attending these meetups coming from different levels. So please, if you have anything, just scan this QR code, let us know, and we will reach out to you as well. I will leave this QR code for just like a few seconds if you just get excited and you want to give a talk next month. Awesome. Next, we have Donnie. So again, like I mentioned at the beginning, Donnie is our biggest supporter for our AWS user group. And actually, he's supporting all the user groups in Asia. So he's been actually supporting us since like 2015. And he's really active with the community. And he's lately doing this series, going live videos. If you guys saw it in our Facebook, and he's doing like some cool stuff as well. So do follow him on LinkedIn and Facebook to see what is he doing. So maybe Donnie as well, you can share with us all about these live videos you've been doing lately. So I will pass it to you from here.
Sure. Thanks, Mo. Yeah, so recently I started live stream to Facebook channels, especially AWS Group Malaysia. I have two series. First one is desktop, which I'm going to cover like a quick solutions and also best practices. And the other series is Hey, what's new? Along with my colleague Derek Bingham, based in Australia. So the Hey What's New series is an extension from AWS What's New channel. So in that series, we are making a demo and showing to everyone on how that you can build a use case or solutions based on the latest features from AWS. Do watch the video.
Yeah, and you're just keeping the videos, right? You are not. We can watch it on demand, right, on Facebook.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of live stream, right? Especially in Facebook, like once the live stream is done, the videos are uploaded as VOD.
Awesome.
So, shall I start now?
Yeah, you can just share your screen when you are ready.
Yeah. I haven't got a chance to test my demo, and after seeing Steve demos, it gives me a lot of anxiety. I hope it goes well. Okay, so hello, apa kabar semuanya? Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Today we're going to talk about 12-factor serverless applications. And just for a quick introduction, my name is Donnie Prakso. I'm a developer advocate covering for ASEAN, working for AWS. I'm based in Singapore. I have more than 16 years experience in software development and system operations. I can say it's a half-half between them. I'm specialized in SOA and microservices and event-driven architecture. It was all started when I was working in banking and telco industry with a super big monolith applications, which we had to refactor to properly handle the traffic requests. And so, yeah, so if you have any questions related to those areas, drop me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter, and subscribe to my newly launched channel on my YouTube. Okay, so now let's talk about what these 12-factor apps. And just for a quick refresher, some of you might already familiar with 12-factor apps, and probably it's the first time for some of you hearing this terminology. So the 12-factor apps were popularized by developers building large-scale applications on platforms, and it was popularized by developers in Heroku back in 2011, I believe. Yeah. So the 12-factor apps is a methodology for building software. Building software. So that use decorative formats for setup automation. This is to minimize the time and cost for new developers joining the project. So you don't want them speeding up half the ramp up time, just trying to figure out where everything is and how you go about actually deploying and building an application. You want them to be able to just get in there and start building. You want to have a clean contract with the underlying operating system, and this offers maximum portability between execution environments. You want to build your code such that no matter what machine your developers are building on, where they're building it, they're not going to run into these dependencies that are very operating system specific. Then you want apps that are suitable for deployment on modern cloud platforms. And then you also want to minimize the divergence between development and production. And it's enabling the continuous deployment. And this gives you, oops, sorry for that. And that's giving you the maximum agility. You want to make sure your various branches of deployment are as similar as possible. Then lastly, that you want to be able to scale up without significant changes to any of your tooling architecture or development practices. So this is being scaled, just you have your code and it can scale, and you're not changing anything else around, that you don't want to have to go back and change a huge code base because suddenly you're getting much more traffic than expected that should just be able to be done without any effect to your code. So let's get into what is serverless applications. We won't get into details on serverless applications. I'm going to cover a quick overview. And the idea of serverless application is to create a decoupled application where your storage or compute and your event sources or entry points, they are all separated. And with AWS, this can be done very neatly. We start with the event source. This could be a change in data state or on a database or some other event within your resources. It could be a request to an endpoint to Amazon API Gateway, or it could be like a changes in some other resource such as a policy change, and that invokes a Lambda function. Now, this is your compute layer. This is where with AWS Lambda, you can run multiple different runtimes, and you can run Lambda functions with different runtimes such as Node.js, Python, Java, C#. And we also have a runtime API, which allows you to bring in your own runtime. And I've seen developers try to use this runtime API to run like a COBOL. And I did a test with Free Pascal. It works. And then from your compute, you can now trigger all your different resources. And that can be like connecting to database or interacting with other services, either third party or native. So these are the foundation of serverless applications, specifically with AWS Lambda. But so now we've already covered a quick overview of 12-factor apps and serverless applications. And the main topic for today is 12-factor apps and how it aligns with serverless applications. So 12-factor apps, or 12FA, as I like to shorten it, to me, it's a guidelines. It's a guidelines that help both developers and operations engineers to minimize software decay or software entropy by avoiding systemic problems. It's a guideline for us to build a better apps and have a better sleep at night. And in recent years, we've also seen a trend on serverless adoption. Most of developers who are building with AWS, they have this preference to adopt serverless first strategy. And that includes on using AWS Lambda and leveraging various integrations from AWS services to build their apps. And that got me thinking, like, I've been building serverless applications even before I joined AWS. And I'm wondering, how does the 12-factor apps align with developing with serverless application? So a couple of weeks ago, I started to create a demo that I'm trying to fully implement the 12-factor apps. The demo that I'm going to show you shortly is a photo booth. It's a simple web app that's going to get the photo of you from your webcam, convert it to base64, and send it over to Amazon API Gateway, which is going to be processed by 3 Lambda functions. The first API is called Send Image API, which is going to process the image from you, convert it to an image, and upload it to Amazon S3 as an object. From there, it has an event that will automatically call the Lambda function called Process Image API. And this API is the heart of this photo booth app. It's going to create an additional banner with text on your photo. And it also adds the cool AWS User Group Kuala Lumpur logo on the top right. And meanwhile, since all of this process is happening asynchronously, the web app is polling every 10 seconds to see if the job is finished or not. And once it's finished, it's going to return back the URL of the process image. And all of these Lambda functions run as stateless, and all related data is stored in Amazon DynamoDB. That's it, pretty simple. I just want to test it out if we can actually implement all 12-factor apps with serverless applications. Now, let's do the demo. Okay, so have this, I think let me pass it to you guys so you can test it out by yourself. Yeah, so can you see my screen? Yeah, so this is the photo booth app. So if I take a picture of me, it's going to capture the image. It's going to encode to base64 and going to process the image and add the text banner on top of the image. So let's wait for a while. There you go. But you can see that it has this banner text here, and we have this nice AWS User Group Malaysia logo. And all of these apps is I built it using AWS CDK. Oops. So this is the AWS CDK. You can see that everything is in here. I'm going to go into details for each factor that we're going to cover. I just wanted to quickly show you and then we have this Lambda function sitting in this folder, right? And then we also have this web, which is deployed using AWS Amplify. Okay, so now that's the demo. That's the application that I've been building. Right. So if we go back to the presentation, so what this session is all about is to share with you. Does it work, Steve? Thank you. Okay, so what this session all about is to share with you my finding. There are 3 things. Right. First, many of the 12-factor apps guidelines align directly with best practices for serverless applications, and I believe they are improved given the nature of AWS serverless services like AWS Lambda, Amazon API Gateway, Amazon eTemperature, and others. The second thing that I discovered is that some of the guidelines, they don't directly align with serverless applications. I found that different interpretation, and not all of them apply, but they are still useful. Don't get me wrong. They are still really useful to really improve how you go about building and developing your applications using serverless. And the third finding is for me that I need to shape my skill on front-end development. Apparently, I'm still not good on building the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's my homework. Okay, so now that you know the application that I've created, and for the remaining of time, I will share some of my key learnings. We'll go into each of these one by one, and also mention where they apply to serverless apps and where they might not necessarily apply. I'll try to squeeze this as much as I can without losing the essential due to the time constraint. And I might skip 1 or 2 things and emphasize more on the implementation. But so starting with the first factor within the 12 factors, we start with code base. So essentially, according to 12-factor apps, we should have one code base track in revision control with many deploys, that all your code should be stored in revision control. It could be Git, it could be Subversion, it could be CVS or Mackerel if you're still using it. And what I found is that when it comes to developing serverless applications, it doesn't really matter if you're using monorepo, multi-repo, or hybrid repo with or without submodules. So let me show you my code repo. Here you go. So this is my this is the application that I have. You can see that I'm using monorepo. Right, and the main thing is that you need to organize the domain or the context properly. For example, if the events are shared, like in my case, it's about the image upload and image generation, then you need to put them in the same repo. If they are working in different contexts, then you will need to have different repo for them. And this reduces confusion and keeps your code quite clean. Yeah, so moving on, the second factor is we have dependencies that we need to explicitly declare and isolate dependencies code that needs to be used by multiple functions. Now, talking about dependencies, it could be anything. It could be libraries, files, or datasets. And the thing is that they should be packaged into their own. Now, as your code base builds, you want to make sure if there's common libraries. And common libraries can be quite tricky if we don't organize them properly. So instead of repeatedly applying those where a lot of errors can happen, it's best to keep those into Lambda layers. There are different ways to do that depending on your language of choice. If you're using Python runtime for your Lambda function, you can create a Lambda layer with the zip file at the root directory where you've got all your imported libraries from pip. And I found that Lambda layers is pretty handy and has an important role to satisfy these dependencies factor. So let me show you how I declare my Lambda layers. Okay. You can see here that. So for the function to generate the image, I wrote in Python and I use pillow libraries. And I didn't include the pillow libraries into my function. Instead, I'm using Lambda layers, and this is the Lambda layers that I use. And then if we go to the Lambda function, yeah, you can see that it also shows you the version, the ARN that I use for the pillow library. And talking about the Lambda layers, like I still remember that 3 years ago. Oops, I still remember that 3 years ago I went to KL, and then I hosted a meetup with. Sorry, I need to go to. Yeah, so I still remember that 3 years ago, shortly after reInvent, I went to KL and hosted a meetup with Kaushik and Mo. And I mentioned about how cool Lambda layers is. So essentially, with Lambda layers, you can refer those dependencies by attaching the Lambda layers version to your Lambda functions. And that means that you can manage the dependencies in a central location. And Lambda layers really promotes a separation of responsibilities, and it lets developers iterate faster on writing the business logic, focusing on what they want to build and not what they need to include and maintain the dependencies. And a couple of things that I think you need to know about these Lambda layers. The first thing is that Lambda layers are immutable. So once that the Lambda is the Lambda layers is created, you can use the version and manage updates. And this way, if you're changing things, your applications should be fine because they're using the version that you previously created and not the latest one. And when a version is deleted or permissions to use them will revoke, a function that you use the layers will continue to work. But you won't be able to recreate those Lambda functions without having to apply a new layer. And you can reference up to 5 layers. And one of those can be a custom runtime, as I mentioned earlier. So we have that runtime API you can create that put it in a layer and then apply to your Lambda function. Moving on to the next factors, config. There are many ways to store config in serverless applications. You can use Lambda environment variables when you create a Lambda function. You can define these with AWS CDK, like what I have done, or use AWS SAM CLI. You can also set to the Amazon API gateway stages as key value pairs, and you can pass these to HTTP endpoints as URI parameters or configuration parameters, and then these will go on to the Lambda invocation, and you can also use the AWS System Manager's parameter store. Yeah. So let me show you how I use config in the demo application. So this is back to our CDK application. So you can see here, this is how I define the parameter store. So this is going to create a parameter store with this name, banner tags. I use the stack prefix to define the stack, and then I put the string value here, 12-factor for serverless apps at AWS UC Group, Kuala Lumpur. Thanks for joining. And then the other way to define the configuration is that by passing the environment variables to AWS Lambda. So you can see here that I have this AWS Lambda definition that I add environment table name for my DynamoDB table. And this is pretty handy, which means that if, like, for example, if I need to change the banner tags that you see on the image, that I don't need to deploy my applications. All I need to do is that I can go to my parameter store. Go to System Manager, parameter store, and then see that if I have this hello developer. Yeah, so you can see here, right? So it's really handy. So you now you see that I use both parameter stores and environment variables. And okay, so moving on to the next factor. Now we know that the option that we have about our config is, that is different from one to another. So I want to share a bit about the System Manager parameter store. With parameter store, you can store different parameters and define them by hierarchies. You can use your own conventions to suit your needs. It can be different parameters for different applications of different stages of deployment. And you can do this all in one place. You also have options to use plain text or encrypted parameters with AMS. And on the right side, you can see the implementation on how to use parameter store for encrypted parameters in Python. You can see that it has these with decryptions equals to true, and then you just use the get parameters functions to get the value. So you don't need to worry about configuring your security measures at every step whenever you retrieve the parameters with parameter store. And this is a really neat and secure solution as it's integrated with KMS. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Ken. So yeah, that's the Lambda layers that I use. Moving on, backing service. So backing service means that when you connect your applications with databases or other data sources, the code of your application has no distinction between local and third-party services. And you can configure this. You can do this by using the config. And I believe that's the only way. And if you're dealing with AWS Lambda and serverless services from AWS, the way that we connect to our backend service is by using config resources or IAM policies. Number 5, build, release, and run. So we need to strictly separate build and run stages. And when it comes to serverless applications, there's not many difference from whether you're building a traditional web applications to a serverless application. We still need to follow the best practices by using continuous integration and continuous delivery. You can use AWS Code Build and AWS Code Pipeline, and you can connect with your GitHub repo, for example. And the most important part is that when it comes to build, release, run, is that your build, release, and run stages should never have code changes done in between. It should be a linear process. Now, this is an example of a minimal deployment pipeline. So we have 3 stages. We have our source code in AWS Code Commit, then it goes to a build stage, then runs deployment for dev environment. And we can run our stubs or mocks here for our different tasks for the different deployment stages. And this is another example which has more layers. It's an example of production pipeline that you push your code to AWS code commit, then code build will build the code, and it goes through deployment for testing environment, and then it goes to staging deployment, and then you could have things where you have a QoS step, where you trigger off a notification, the text message or an email, and wait for approval before going to production. Or you can also integrate with what DeveloperSteve presented earlier by integrating to Snake with the security scan. And to me, this is a really good practice to do this, because you're keeping your code base separate while you're keeping the differences between your different stages and environments very minimal, and then adding in steps to ensure that all code is good and secure before you get to production. All right, so number 6, executes the application as one or more stateless process. And what I found is that when it comes to developing with AWS Lambda, it's an inherent property of how Lambda is designed. By nature, Lambda functions are stateless, and you really shouldn't store anything in memory, because there is no promise of being able to reuse the same environment of any single Lambda that has been invoked. Otherwise, you will run into complicated things like race conditions. If you need to keep the data, that kind of data should be stored outside of AWS Lambda and served through like a database or through a case. Just a quick tip here. If you need to store the data for your applications, you probably want to use DynamoDB, which you can set the TTL, the time to live. That could be pretty handy if you need to manage the session data. So number 7, port binding to export services via port binding. Now, this is something that does not apply to Lambda or to serverless applications. The reason is that serverless applications are triggered by events. For example, Lambda functions can be triggered in 3 different models. They can be triggered synchronously, asynchronously, or pull-based. And one best practice is to create independent functions to process the request. Okay, so these are the AWS Lambda execution model. You can use asynchronous, you can use asynchronous and pull-based, as I mentioned earlier. I just want to give a quick overview for this each execution model. The synchronous example is pretty straightforward. You have an Amazon API gateway endpoints. So in this case, we have /order. You call it and then go straight into your Lambda function, and then you can return back the response. Then you have an asynchronous event, and when you invoke a function asynchronously, you don't wait for a response from the function code. You hand off the event to Lambda, and Lambda handles the rest. One example from the demo is how the image is processed by Lambda when S3 detects a new object is uploaded. Then lastly, you have pull-based, and any changes to data sources of resources, like something gets added into Amazon DynamoDB, or data was pushed into an Amazon Kinesis, it will then be processed by Lambda. And the way it works is that AWS will manage the poller on your behalf and perform synchronous invokes of your functions with this type of integration. Okay, so next we'll talk about concurrency. This is the scale out via the process model. And this does not apply with serverless and Lambda functions, as they are designed to scale automatically based on load. You can fork these threads inside of your function execution, but remember, there are practical limits like the memory, CPU, network constraints, and so it all depends on how you configure your function. So Lambda only exposes a memory control, but that memory control scales the CPU and the network capacity proportionally. So if your code is CPU, network, or memory bound, it might just be cheaper to choose adding more memory to your Lambda function. Next, disposability. So you want to maximize the robustness with a fast startup and graceful shutdown. Now, when it comes to serverless applications, I realize it doesn't really need shutdown, so we can focus more on fast startup. There's a number of factors that to that. For example, packet size, the language runtime, using VPC or not, or any other code that needs to be handled while building the function. And this is quite hard. I found it really challenging because all of these different factors. But what I found it useful is to use AWS X-Ray to gain more visibility into our application. And just to give you a quick overview about AWS X-Ray, AWS X-Ray gives you a unified view of all of your resources within your system. So you can see what's taking the most time, what kind of requests are the bottleneck, and you can see down to the milliseconds. And you can use this kind of insights to improve the speed of your functions. And based on the insight that you get from X-Ray, then you can determine how much memory that you need to set for your AWS Lambda functions. Okay, so number 10, dev parity. We have touched base on this previously when we covered build, release, and run, and also config. So the key is really keeping development staging and production or any kind of environments as similar as possible. Now, this is made really easy with serverless applications. You can make use of environment variables or the parameter store for configuring different stages. You can pass your different environment variables within your CI/CD process to build and release artifacts that supports multiple environments. And there are many ways on doing this. My preference is to use CDK. So let me show you how it looks like in CDK. So on my CDK, I define 2 stages. So I have like a staging here, and then we also have this production, right? There are many ways on doing this, and this is only one of the example. So if I do like a list of all the stacks within this application, we can see that there are 2 stages. We have prod hello developer and staging hello developer. And what you can do is that what you can minimize the parity between all of these stages by using CDK by just giving the name, the different name for each of the stack. Okay, so moving on, the trip logs as event streams logging. So if you've been building with AWS, you know this for sure that Amazon CloudWatch treat logs as stream of aggregated time-ordered events connected from the output streams of all running processes and backend services. There's no log files and no log routine, no out of this space anymore because of logs. And from CloudWatch, these logs can be turned into metrics. And you can also use this raw data to be sent to Amazon S3. Or if you want to do more advanced inspection with Amazon Elasticsearch. If you're building API, then the metrics for Lambda and Amazon API Gateway are automatically collected and sent to CloudWatch. And you can also use CloudWatch SDK to send your own custom metrics. The final factor here is run admin or management tasks as one of processes. In short, this doesn't apply to Lambda. You already limit your functions based on use case, and most of the times you have these single functions per actions. And if we're talking administrative tasks like database migration or file transfers, you should already be doing that with Lambda function, or you can also use ec2 run command. But and to summarize our discussion, when it comes to building serverless applications, we need to emphasize more on code reusability and to scope your functions to specific contexts. Then the factors related to underlying process management, network ports, concurrency, admin tasks, processes are not an issue, and they are just the nature of how serverless services, especially Lambda function, is designed. And lastly, of all the various features, we look at best practices for serverless, align pretty closely with these 12 factors app, so you might already be close to meeting the 12-factor bar already. And the rest becomes more about the philosophy on how you go about building your applications and organizing all of your code. Okay, so the last slide. If you want to dive deeper into serverless, you can go to this page. You will find lots of use cases, getting started guide to understanding the details of its services. Yes. Q&A if there's any questions. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Donnie. Guys, yep. You can just unmute yourself as well and ask Donnie any question directly.
Hey Donnie, just want to ask because a lot of people are trying to move from their traditional kind of monolithic architecture going to microservices, and there are lots of bumps in the way. So typically, what would be the best first step they can take to get onto a serverless architecture?
That's a really good question, Ken. So my advice is that knowing the pattern first. You don't need to go into these services. But what I really love is that goes to the Strangle pattern. I believe Martin Fowler wrote about that. Let's see, this one is the microservices.io. Yeah, this one is really cool. So the Strangle pattern is that this is a pattern to help you to move from the legacy applications. It can be monolithic, it can be anything as long as legacy, and you want to move to a modern application, modern system. So first step is that knowing this pattern is really useful. So essentially what it's going to do is that it's going to reroute the requests from your legacy apps and route them to the new applications, like a by percentage or any kind of the weight that you want to define. And then you need to know this pattern first. And the second thing is that I found a lot of the developers, it was so hard for them to refactor to like a fully serverless applications and like using AWS Lambda functions, because there are so many things that they need to break down to details, right? So if you at that stage, what I really recommend is to use AWS Fargate. So AWS Fargate, for those who are not really aware of it, is a serverless containers that you can use with AWS container orchestrator, like Amazon ECS, and also the Amazon EKS. But so with AWS Fargate, essentially is that you don't need to manage your own infrastructure to maintain your resource pool. So Amazon ECS will manage it for you. Now, the key perspective here is just to delegate as much as you can to the cloud provider, so you can focus on your application. And lastly, that if you can break down your have like a really specific domain for your applications, I really suggest you to use AWS Lambda functions. So yeah, I think that's all, Ken. I hope that helps.
Awesome.
Great. Do we have any other question, guys? This is your chance to complain or ask directly to Donnie.
I love that.
If you want to request something on AWS, this is your chance.
Can I give away AWS credits here?
Yeah.
Okay. For those who ask, Ken, you are entitled to get $25 AWS credit codes.
Nice. Thanks.
No worries, man.
Cool. So the next person who will ask Donnie a question, he will get some.
Click, click.
Click, click.
Everyone is so shy.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Donnie.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed it. Let me just share my screen quickly. Okay, again, like I mentioned, you can reach out to Steve and Donnie on their LinkedIn if you have any question. And Donnie is so helpful, so you can reach him anytime and ask him some questions. Before we close our meetup for today, do scan this QR code to get from you some feedback on our speakers' topics and our community and how we can improve it. So we will find a form here. You will fill it up. Just take like a few minutes to help us improve our community. I will leave this QR for a few seconds. And next, do join us. I'm not sure. I see some people actually join us from LinkedIn, some people from Facebook, and some from Meetup. And now we have a YouTube channel, which is this one. And we almost have 100 subscribers. We just started, me, Salam, and Koshik, I think 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. So do subscribe to our channel. We just need 3 guys, and we will be 100. Hopefully next year will be 100,000 subscribers. Hopefully. Again, I will share. You can watch the previous meetups if you are interested as well. All the meetups will be recorded and will be uploaded there as well. And that's it, guys. That's it. Again, if you want to talk for the next meetup in August, just fill up the form from the Facebook group. I will reshare it again. Fill up the form, and we'll reach out to you. Any level is welcome here. So thank you all, guys. Thanks, Donnie. Thanks, Steve, for this awesome topics you guys today mentioned. And thanks to Salam, who's doing always the streaming for Facebook and YouTube. Koshik is sick today, so he didn't attend. So thanks, and see you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.